Firstly, I'd just like to say a really big thank you to everyone. The response to the last two videos were absolutely incredible. Everyone participated in the question and answers for today's video. Thank you to everyone for liking and subscribing and sharing the video with as many people as possible. You really helped reach a bigger audience, and I really hope that, that continues, because I still haven't reached the audience I want to reach, and I'm so glad for some of the messages I've received. With some of the messages I've received, I was so glad to see the positive response, and that it attracted like-minded people, because that's why I'm making this. So thank you very much, guys, and let's keep it up. Now on to the Q&A.
Liam DeFancio, I'm sorry if I butchered that, asks, is The Undertaker at the start of your video from Smackdown 2?
So yes, Undertaker at the start of the video in the ministry attire with the Titantron is all from Smackdown 2, the Definitive Edition. I can't wait to show you what I've actually added back into Smackdown 2, as it is a near one-to-one recreation of the early press build. So everything you saw in the trailers and magazine previews from the time of its announcement till about what you got in the final game, basically till reviewers got final review code, pretty much everything is in there and more.
Shotgun Justice asked, number 1, why no Sean Stasiak? Number 2, are you planning on continuing to work on enhancing the mod once it's released? The Shut Your Mouth models are noticeably a lot lower quality than the Here Comes the Pain ones, which is understandable, but would it be possible to remove the varnish-like effect they have? It makes them stick out erogenously with regards to the lighting. Why no Sean Stasiak? Well, quite simply, I ran out of space, and I figured you're going to download my Smackdown Shut Your Mouth Definitive Edition anyway, which will have Sean Stasiak. So instead of adding him into the non-playable roster on Season, I decided to use all of those spots for the Divas and leave Sean Stasiak in Smackdown Shut Your Mouth. As far as the Smackdown Shut Your Mouth varnish-like shine to the models, it's actually not a resolution issue. The reason you think it's lower resolutions is probably because of the size of the textures that I had to use because of modding at the time and capabilities of modding at the time. That now has since changed, so when I have time I might actually go back and change every single Smackdown Shut Your Mouth character again with higher textures so they look better. The shine problem is due to the RTX file. There is a shader problem in there which we haven't quite been able to figure out yet, but given how much progress has happened within 4 years, at some point it will happen, and the second it does, I will update and fix every single one of those models, so no worries here. Diamante Loco asks, is the video at the start of the clips from your other work that we will be seeing? I'm near 25 minutes in already, waiting for the next one.
Yes, I know some people thought the video at the start was from Smackdown 1. Actually, that is from Smackdown 2, the Definitive Edition that I've made. The only clip that is using press footage is the Smackdown Shut Your Mouth cutscene. Everything else, Just Bring It, Here Comes the Pain, and Smackdown 2 has all been from my patches in the intro.
Youngboy11 asks, a question I always had is why did they leave Hogan and Warrior's selection pictures in the retail game? More so with Warrior because he threatened to sue if his likeness was in the game, and to me it seems risky to leave that in the game files instead of removing everything that relates to his image.
Well, they left all 3 of those selection pictures in simply because both deals fell through while the game was midway or more through development. I remember certain magazine outlets did actually get to play with Ultimate Warrior and take screenshots of him. So that's why those models were ripped, and also access to hacking PS2 was nowhere near what it is now. Back then, trying to crack into those discs and get, open up a TM2 file and find where they all were, it was much different to how it is now. So no one would really have found it.
Seaside 90 asks, is it true they replaced a lot of people who were supposed to be in the game around 2002 to 2003 with the Legends? Because I always felt that it was the reason people like Billy Kidman, Jamie Noble, Bradshaw, Crash Holly, etc. were missing despite them still being on the active roster around then. That's a great question. I get asked this a lot. The answer is no. Legends were always a part of the game. In fact, this was their debut and they were going to become a staple of the series. I actually cover this in depth in Rebuilding Smackdown Just Bring It. At the start of development, Yuke seemed to create a placeholder roster. So there won't be any renders, there'll just be a placeholder picture, and then they'll put names of all the superstars that they would, and divas they would like in the game. I believe then that list is submitted by THQ to WWE, and then WWE will ex-nay the names that they do not want in the game. After they get that list, I believe development starts on people. So this is why people like Bradshaw, Billy Gunn, Molly Holly, William Regal all have win poses and more assets than other people, because later on in the game they will, I suppose they'll probably go through another period of submission. Those names will get whittled down and cut off until it shapes the final roster. I've also got a lot of questions about the FBI, so Chuck Palumbo, Nunzio, and Johnny Stamboli. Again, part of this applies to what I just said. The other part is Chuck Palumbo and Nathan Jones were never a part of this game. Several sources asked THQ about this in 2003, and they confirmed that they weren't. Only IGN and GamePro actually have Johnny Stamboli and Nunzio as confirmed characters that never made it into the final game. Perhaps they were running low on time and never got made, or it may have been that IGN had actually, on their preview build, seen an unselectable placeholder for Stamboli and Nunzio, and not realized what that actually was, and then just put it in their confirmed roster chart. It's like when the game was first announced. During an interview, one of THQ's staff mentioned that Creator Pay-Per-View and Creator Belt will be coming back in Here Comes the Pain. Unfortunately, due to development time, this actually never made it, and instead wound up in the sequel, Smackdown vs. Raw. So I hope that answers your question, and hopefully everyone else's who asked about the FBI and other things like that. Inevitable Death asks, seeing as almost all the females were shifted to season, what happens if you select the bra and panties match in exhibition? In other words, will the female substituted models occupy their spot, Raven for example, or will the default bra and panties models still be selectable? Some mods have had this happen, but I don't know how in depth you went for this mod.
Okay, so what happens when you select the bra and panties match is all the other wrestlers that I replace the divas with are actual males. So the game reads them as such. So Stephanie McMahon and Trish are the only two people you can pick in exhibition. There's no other way around that, unfortunately.
3250. Will these suit attires, Ric Flair's included for that matter, be able to bleed? One glitch I've never forgotten about in the original game.
Yes, all suit attires and backstage attires are able to bleed. I've added blood textures for everyone, so you'll never have that glitch again.
I know it has been possible for later games, but is there any possibility of adding entrances for the newly added characters? For example, maybe Jeff Hardy's Shut Your Mouth entrance, since no data of his Here Comes the Pain one exists.
Well, as I said in the video, I'm already looking through animation data, trying to make sense of the Here Comes the Pain entrance animation data to fix the Rock's entrance. Unfortunately, since my time playing with animation data, from what I've found is Smackdown 2, Smackdown Just Bring It, and Smackdown Shut Your Mouth all share the same animation data. So moves can be moved from one to the other pretty seamlessly. Here Comes the Pain, Smackdown vs. Raw, and Smackdown vs. Raw 2006 are all interchangeable. How much can vary, and it does take a lot of work. So I am looking at moving some entrances from Smackdown vs. Raw if they're compatible, and replacing entrances on the presets. So hopefully then you get a Jeff Hardy entrance and so on and so forth. This is all theoretical at the moment though. I first have to figure out the animation data for entrances in Here Comes the Pain, see if I can fix the Rock's entrance, and then take it from there. So we'll see. But fingers crossed, I hope so.
Lars Left Drumstick asks, would you be open to possibly creating a tutorial video on how to alter textures, models, or possibly arenas and inject the files into either Smackdown Shut Your Mouth or Here Comes the Pain? Obviously your current workload of not only making these mods but creating extensive videos on them will take you a lot of time and effort. But I'd love to see you make a tutorial at some point down the line so that we can do similar things to you ourselves. Thanks for the question. That's actually a really useful question for me to answer, because I'm sure a lot of people were wondering this. Yes, I will do video tutorials, because I remember when I was learning to mod different things, as somebody that has had multiple concussions and has dyslexia, and I mean quite severe dyslexia. In fact, I actually film when I try and test new ways of modding, especially if it's things I'm unsure of, because I worry about forgetting. I think video tutorials are just an easier and more effective way of getting people to learn. I will absolutely be doing them in the future. So don't worry, you'll be able, once all my stuff is out, you'll be able to mix and match to your heart's content. This was so good. How long to episode 2?
Thanks so much. I'm glad you're enjoying it. I'm planning on doing wrestling videos every Friday. The next Rebuilding Smackdown is likely going to be in 2 weeks, so that'll be Rebuilding Smackdown episode 2.
Not Kamina asks, question for the Q&A vid. What do you want to add in the most next? And will you add in 3-minute warning?
Sorry about the noise, somebody decided to busk outside my house. Okay, so what do I want to add in the most? Are we talking just Here Comes the Pain? Because then I think that's kind of obvious, right? It's going to be Hardy, Hogan, Warrior. But outside of that, I would really like to be able to get Rock 2, because that's a preview build and I know that is out there. So with Rock 2, I'd be able to get that entrance I want and swap it over. Plus you get the Rock 2 model. And will I make 3-minute warning? Not yet. That would require me to sculpt completely new models. So in a future update, they will get done.
Daryl Jasons asks, I have a question for the Q&A. Will you be making more content in this style for other game series? And is your Patreon to help with production values? Well, this is actually quite a relevant question today, Daryl. While I've made no secret about needing the Patreon support for my personal life, I suppose, I also need it professionally to keep doing these videos properly. For example, today I had most of these questions and answers actually filmed and done. And as I was uploading them from my phone is pretty old, it crashed and I lost some of the videos. And with no time to actually use some type of something like iCare Backup Restore, they were gone, and I'm now having to record some audio so the question and answers video goes up on time. It's why I started the Patreon. While yes, I would much appreciate the support and help from people that just love my work and want to contribute to not only the modifications I put out, or video game restorations, but also the video content I put out. But it would also help immensely with the production. I think my content over time will probably have a much bigger reach than obviously I do now, or at least I'm hoping it will. So hopefully, if even a quarter of that audience would support me on the lowest tier on Patreon for like $1, I could probably end up getting a new camera, or a camera rather, and some proper lighting, proper microphone, and a capture card, so I could show you guys a lot of cool stuff from things like Raw 2 and stuff like that. But obviously that is optional, and I hope it is times like this where I'm like, oh god, I'm literally trying to do high-tech things with essentially a toaster. But for people that do support me, thank you so much. It is absolutely incredible that you do, and that you really enjoy what I do so much that you're willing to support. And if you fit, and if financially, if you can't support, please absolutely don't worry. I completely understand and know that, and know that as long as you enjoy what I'm doing, I'll keep trucking on and try my best to entertain you regardless. Comic Clash asks, looking forward to the Q&A and all future videos. My question is this channel only going to be covering wrestling games? I'd like more video game content like this from this era. It's what I grew up with. Thanks for the question, Comic Clash. Yes, I will be doing more than just wrestling on this channel. What made me do this channel in the first place was, after I hurt my neck, I needed a backup plan of what am I actually going to do with myself in the time being. Obviously, while that was going on, my parent got ill, so I was taking care of her while brainstorming things like Rebuilding Smackdown It's actually what led me to working on the Smackdown games in the first place, because I was home for about 4 years. Then in around 2017, I started getting back in shape. I was healed up and thought I was ready to go. But toward the end of 2017, around Christmas, my right arm and right leg started to go numb. So I went to the doctors, and for about a year, they were doing tests. They didn't really know what was wrong. And obviously in that time, I'd lost my parent and got the word this year that, yes, you will need neck surgery. So I'm on a waiting list for that, which further made me want to do this and be like, right, well, you have the time to do this. I also then was listening to a gaming podcast while I was processing all this information, and it's one that I'd listened to for many years. One of the new staffers of that podcast was talking about a game that I know people that actually work in the company that's releasing this game. So I'm a huge fan of that franchise, and obviously with the people working there that I know that I'm friends with, I knew it was already going to be announced for this game. So when I'm listening to this podcast, they're reviewing the E3 trailers. Now at E3, they only showed a certain section of this game. And this staff member went, oh, well, they only showed this because I've heard it's going to be several games. Upon hearing that, I was like, he did not hear this from anyone. Because knowing people that work in that industry for that company, I know that that particular game has an exclusive rights deal with a magazine in Japan. You see, in Japan, print media is still going strong and is quite a lucrative business. The company releasing that game also has a share in the magazine itself. So anything new that is announced for that game, and for that franchise for that matter, this has been going on for many years, will be announced first in that magazine, or printed first in that magazine. So when that magazine is ready to ship, then the company will release trailers and so on and so forth at industry events detailing new stuff, so it coincides with the magazine release and doesn't hurt its sales. So it got me thinking, how many times have I actually heard people in the last 10 years say they have heard when really it's they assume? It pushed me to want to not only do Rebuilding Smackdown, but actually do this channel where if I have a game I want to talk about, there'll be 100% transparency, where it'll be like, well, I've compiled this information, or I know people that work there, or I'm just having a guess and I'm assuming, and we're assuming together, and I'm going to give you my thoughts on something. I don't want there to be this, well, I've heard this is going to be several games, but it's not. Otherwise you end up with egg on your face. I want this channel to have a lot of Rebuilding Smackdown type content. You're not only getting a cool documentary and a look back at the past, you're also going to maybe be getting something with that, whether it be mods or new ways to play or video game restorations, things that I'm passionate about. And I may do some reviews of current things as well if I think they're worth doing. Marlon Anthony asks, would you consider adding Undertaker's bandana from his entrance to one of his match attires? I was disappointed that he had 2 attires in the original, and not one of them could have sported a bandana, which he always started his matches with. After all, they opted to fix Hogan's bandana permanently to his model, which I feel was more due to Hogan's insecurity about his hair than anything else. You're probably right.
Okay, Marlon, let's answer your first question. Yes, for Undertaker's third attire, I will add a bandana that he wears during the matches. So I hope that makes you happy.
I know you mentioned giving Shawn Michaels another pair of tights as an attire. I don't think you'll get many protests about replacing that infamous brown tights. I always wish we got more of a neutral HBK attire like plain black or plain red tights as an alternative. Heck, what about the white and red tiger stripes from Royal Rumble 2003?
In response to your second question, I'm going to keep the brown tights for Shawn Michaels. Unpopular, but maybe I will add either Armageddon 2003 or Royal Rumble 2003 as his final attire, so then you go from Survivor Series to Mania.
He also wrote, plus my mind was blown by the fact that you're British too. You mentioned you worked at some of these events in the industry around this period too, and that's why you're so knowledgeable about early versions and what changed. But you look quite young. What role did you have in these events at what I presume was a pretty young age? And will you be going into detail in your videos about how your relationship with these older builds and your roles in the industry?
Thanks for the compliment. Yes, I will be going into my background with the industry and how far it went up to. Probably in the Rebuilding Smackdown Just Bring It video, I go into a bit more of that, simply because I wasn't in the industry. I was still in high school when that game came out. So basically all the information I have is compiled, as well as going back and talking to people when I started working in the industry in 2003 and late 2002, to people who saw that game and what they were told. And then I've listened to interviews which they took, I've read transcripts, and then and then seeing what they edited down for the magazines and whatnot. So I'll absolutely be going into more detail about it. How I got into the industry, well, that's a pretty straightforward one. Before there was a PlayStation experience in America, there was a PlayStation experience in England, and it used to be held from 2002 till 2004, may have been the last one, or maybe they did one in 2005. Anyway, so it used to coincide with a bike show that was going on around the same time. My girlfriend at the time was modeling for the bike show. She told me about that. My buddy at the time was also like, hey, we should go check out these video games. And I basically went and saw Smackdown Shut Your Mouth and a few other things on that open day. But then the year later, when my girlfriend was going to work the bike show again, she put in a word for me about working the PlayStation experience because she knew people there. So I worked the PlayStation experience that year. PlayStation experience, that's where I met my manager. And he just saw that I had such a, I guess, just a zest for things like wrestling, Dragon Ball, stuff, kind of games that they weren't necessarily going to cover. Wrestling they were, but WWF was, well, WWE at this point, was on the downtrend with a lot of people, but I was still fixated on it. I was still like, yeah, the Invasion wasn't great, but hey, 2002 still pretty tight. I know they've destroyed The Rock and Austin's characters, but outside of that, like, 2002 still pretty good. And, 2003, of course, I enjoyed that very much as well. So I was still deep in it, that they liked the enthusiasm, they liked the questions I wanted to ask, they liked the fact that I was willing to do little things, even like upload screenshots and correct minor things, just doing like real odd jobs, but just paying such close attention. And I guess just immersing myself in, whether it be stuff for, I'm trying to think at the time, it was Here Comes the Pain, but what was the Dragon Ball game that year? Must have been Budokai 2. Was Budokai? Yes it was, because it still had, I remember the QTE demonstrator. Yes, so yeah, Budokai 2. And then, a few other games like Konami's Return to Ninja Turtles. I know a lot of people probably like, don't talk about other games, talk about wrestling. But yeah, so when Konami came back, they hadn't done Turtles games since the arcade or the Super NES and Mega Drive. So when they came back and announced that with the 2002/2003 show, they would be doing a new slew of games, I was extremely excited. So I was like seeing things like that, while other people were looking at things like Wind Waker or Mario Sunshine or whatever. I'm trying to think, what were the other real big games out at that time? Metal Gear Solid 3, Zone of the Enders 2, even though I really wanted to see those as well. But yeah, basically, sometimes it would help that I was into the more, I suppose, niche games. So I hope that answers your question. And that's it for this Q&A. Unfortunately, I had more answers recorded, but my phone froze up and I lost a couple of the answers. So I will answer those questions in the comments later today and tomorrow. If you can, please give this video a like. Please share it with as many people as possible, as well as the previous videos. And please don't forget to subscribe. If you can support me on Patreon, I'd super appreciate it at patreon.com/ScottJ. Until next time, take care, guys.